Montpelier Agway Farm and Garden and Central Vermont Auto Mart. Support your local businesses. Shop local.
Join Nelson Ace Hardware for a Stars and Stripes barbecue party on Saturday, May 27th. Bob Nelson and the team will fire up the Traeger pellet grill and the Weber gas grill to serve up tasty treats. A $5 donation enters you in a raffle with prizes including a Craftsman mower, log splitter, Ego trimmer blower kit, and a Craftsman pressure washer. Proceeds go to Burlington Children's Hospital. The Nelson Ace Hardware Stars and Stripes barbecue party, Saturday, May 27th, 11 to 2, Main Street in Barrie.
The Brady Farkas Show is produced and funded by WDEV and the Radio Vermont Group. We welcome listener feedback. Email your comments to wdev@radiovermont.com.
The energy. So the barber trims my beard all nice, like an artist. Now, I didn't tell him to do that. I wanted the beard gone. So then I went home and shaved it off completely after I was done. I felt horrible.
The passion.
Rafael Devers is the biggest contract in franchise history. He needs to be a leader for this Red Sox team.
The opinions on all your favorite teams.
Are the Patriots close to playoff contention? Yes. Are they close to Super Bowl contention? Hell no.
This is the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV AM, FM, and WDEVradio.com.
What's up, everybody? Happy Monday here on the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV AM and FM and WDEVradio.com. With the Red Sox out west, we have a full show all 90 minutes. We have a full show all 90 minutes every single day this week. Cannot wait to be with you every single day up until 7 o'clock. Sox baseball is on tonight, 8:38 pregame show, 9:38 first pitch, taking on the Los Angeles Angels. You can get on in on the text line, 802-585-3026. That's 802-585-3026. All 90 minutes. It won't all be spent on the Celtics, but we need a lot of that 90 minutes to talk about what's happened. We're brought to you by Fecto Homes. Adam Kaufman of WBZ News Radio in Boston, our favorite Celtics insider, is going to be with us about 6:10. I have a feeling I'm going to go a little long with Adam today because there's a lot to get to here. I mean, the Celtics right now are a loaded topic. So they're down 3-0 in the series. Their backs are against the wall. They've effectively lost the series already. They quit yesterday. Let's just get right to it.
4, 3, 2, 1.
And here we go.
All right, the opening thoughts on the Brady Farkas Show are brought to you by Sticks and Stuff and by Swanton Lumber, Vermont's most complete locally owned home center with locations in Enosburg, Derby, Middlesex, St. Albans, and at Swanton Lumber. They're online at sticksandstuff.com. I want to start with this, and I hope I convey this point correctly. 802-585-3026. I am not sure if Joe Mazzulla is the right guy for the Boston Celtics. I am not sure if he is. But that said, I am also positive that he is not the only thing wrong in this series. I am also positive he is not the biggest thing wrong with this series. I do not follow the intricacies of NBA coaching enough to tell you that he is a good coach, right? I can't tell you that he is a good coach, a great coach, an average coach, or I can't tell you that. I'll be as transparent as I can, but I am positive that he is not the biggest thing wrong with this team, if that makes sense. Can we complain that Joe Mazzulla's team has become more offensively than defensively minded? Yes, we can. That would be a fair complaint. Can we complain about this starting lineup or about this rotation or this guy's minutes? And yeah, sure we can. That's all fair. That's all in bounds, and all of it might be true. But at the end of the day, Joe Mazzulla doesn't go 1 for 14 from 3 like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum did last night. Joe Mazzulla doesn't talk trash to Jimmy Butler, get in his grill in game 2, ignite him so Butler closes the game in Jordan-esque fashion, and you're down 2-0. Joe Mazzulla's not out on the floor getting pummeled and quitting last night. You know what I mean. I see everybody today taking shots at Joe Mazzulla. And I mean everybody. Colin Cowherd of Fox Sports Radio says he needs to be fired. Jay Williams of ESPN Radio says he might need to be fired. Brian Windhorst of ESPN Radio says I think there's a chance he will be fired. Everybody's blaming this on Mazzulla. Oh, he's out coached. He's not qualified. He's overmatched. Spoelstra's got his number. And maybe that stuff is true. It might be, but you can't have that be the first thing that you point to. You can't have him be the first thing that you point to. I refuse to believe that. The NBA is a player's, you do not get to have it both ways. In the NFL, we know it is a quarterback and coach-driven league, right? We know that. The head coach and your quarterback, they mean everything. In the NBA, I am told constantly that coaching doesn't really matter that much. It's a players-driven league. It is a star-driven league. Phil Jackson, anybody could have won with Jordan and Scottie. Anybody could have won with Shaq and Kobe. Anybody can win with LeBron. Anybody can win with Steph. Steve Kerr's not that great. I hear it all the time. Coaching isn't that important in the NBA. You can't have it both ways. If it's a players-driven league and the coach deserves no credit, then it's a players-driven league and the coach doesn't get all the blame. The Celtics have two, not one, but two all-NBA players, and they have more turnovers than assists in this series. The Celtics have multiple veteran players. This is not a team full of 20-year-olds. This is not a team that's never been there. This is not a team that, like the Sacramento Kings, they had never been there. Some immaturity, the inability to hold a 2-0 series lead against Golden State, that's somewhat predictable and definitely understood. That's not the Boston Celtics. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum have been to 3 conference finals together. Marcus Smart has been to 4. I believe Brown has been to 4 as well. They've all been to the finals. Al Horford is a decades-long veteran in the NBA. If it's a players-driven league all season and the coach gets no credit, that it's a players-driven league still in the postseason and the coach doesn't get all the blame. I am not here to defend Joe Mazzulla. I'm not here to tell you that he is the best coach in the league, but I am here to say that if you're just scapegoating Joe Mazzulla, you're doing it wrong. I mean, I heard Cowherd say he's got to be fired. I also heard Cowherd earlier today say the Celtics need to admit they, quote, hired the wrong guy. Really? I would this is what frustrates me. People act like Cowherd, like the Celtics went through a normal hiring process and came out the other end with Joe Mazzulla, and they need to atone for that mistake. They didn't go through a normal hiring process. Joe Mazzulla was what was there. He was what was available. Look, I mean, do people not remember back in September, 2 weeks until training camp, or maybe it was even it was days before training camp. It was a week and a half before the preseason started. Days before training camp, Ime Udoka gets suspended, commits improprieties. This totally blindsides you from what happened. Totally blindsides you, and as a result, you've got to pivot, and you've got to pivot quickly. Okay, Will Hardy, a top assistant for the Celtics. He had already left. He was in Utah. He took the head job there. Okay, he's not an option. Joe Mazzulla was. So don't act like, oh, the Celtics chose the wrong guy. The Celtics, maybe he is the wrong guy, but he was thrust upon them. It was not a normal hiring process. The Celtics did what most businesses do: promote from within, promote familiarity, bring up a guy who's got familiarity with the employees and with the management. Could they have hired Jeff Van Gundy? Sure. Could they have hired Mark Jackson? Sure. Could they have hired Quinn Snyder? Sure. Those all would have been options. And we all would have crushed him for bringing in somebody outside the family, probably. And in Jackson and Van Gundy's case, someone who hadn't coached for a decade or more. You don't have to like Joe Mazzulla. You can want Joe Mazzulla fired, but don't act like it's all his fault. It's not. And don't act like the Celtics chose him out of a pool of normal candidates. They didn't. They did not choose him out of a normal group of candidates. If they fire Joe Mazzulla after the series, they're going to have Mike Budenholzer to choose from. They're going to have Nick Nurse to choose from. They're going to have NBA championship coaches to choose from. And that will be different. And you can get somebody arguably better than Joe Mazzulla if you choose to go in that direction. But it is not all his fault. It is a players' league all year long. It is not a players' league just because it's the playoffs. At some point, the players need to be held responsible for what's happening as well. Mazzulla's not 1 for 14 from 3 last night like Tatum and Brown were. Mazzulla's not turning it over in the fourth quarter, dribbling into a crowd like Tatum has been in these playoffs. Mazzulla doesn't look disconnected like Jaylen Brown does. Mazzulla's not out putting up offers like Malcolm Brogdon is. You don't have to think he's the answer, but you have to admit that he's not the only problem with this team. He's also not the biggest problem. And thankfully, Al Horford recognizes it because Mazzulla last night took the responsibility and said, hey, this is all my fault, basically. Al Horford at least sees what's what.
Yeah, he's being generous, but at the end of the day, that falls on each player. We know what we have to do. We knew the magnitude of this game, and as a player, I take responsibility because, you know, we didn't have what we needed to have. So that's what that is.
Al Horford is right there. It is not all Joe Mazzulla's fault. I've said this analogy probably 3 times in the last 2 weeks, and it remains true today. This is not 10-year-old baseball. This is not 12-year-olds AAU. Okay, that age, high school even, the coach can motivate, right? The coach's job is to get you ready to play. The coach's job is to motivate you and light a fire within you and find out what buttons to press. That's true. It's not the case at high-level college, and it's not the case in the NBA. These players need to be able to motivate themselves, and that's the bottom line. I believe that Joe Mazzulla and his staff had a game plan that was articulately done, perfectly laid out. Was it going to work? I don't know. But I believe they did what they could to get ready. And the players have absolutely let everyone down around them. They're disengaged. They're not attentive. They're careless at times. They're not playing well. Will in Plattsburgh says, can't throw this on Joe. Players have to be accountable for themselves. I agree. Virginia in Starksboro says, I'd ship out Jaylen Brown before Joe Mazzulla. That is a very interesting point. We are going to talk about that. Adam Kaufman's going to be with us about 6:10. We're going to ask him something of that nature. Peter in Williston says, Monty Williams is my choice if Mazzulla gets fired. I think Mazzulla deserves another year, especially if Brown is traded. I will say this. I kind of agree with what Peter just said. Kind of a preview of my talk with Adam. I agree with what Peter just said. This team cannot just be brought back. And I have waffled on this a lot, and I recognize that. And I don't want to be a fence sitter, and I don't want to be a guy who tells you one thing on Monday and changes his mind on Tuesday. The Celtics are causing me to do this. Based on what has happened in this series, I do not believe this team can just be brought back as presently constructed. Hey, let's just run it back. Something is going to have to change. And that something can be keep all the players and get rid of Joe Mazzulla and bring in a Monty Williams or a Mike Budenholzer or a Nick Nurse. 2 of those 3 are championship-winning coaches. That can be your change. Or your change can be bring back Mazzulla, but you're going to make some changes to the personnel on the roster. I can justify both. And I'm telling you right now, at this point, I kind of tend to lean towards changing up the roster. And I didn't say that last week, and I don't think I would have ever said that 6 months ago. But it appears to me like this core, does it need to be blown up? No, it's too good to just blow up. But does it need tweaking? Yeah, it appears that it does. I have told you forever I was worried about Jaylen Brown. When we found out that he was eligible for the Supermax and the most money was going to come to Boston, I thought that was going to keep him in Boston. I no longer know. Honestly, nothing at this point would surprise me with Jaylen Brown. Do the Celtics not offer him the Supermax and he just hits free agency? Unlikely, but possible. They may be tired of him. Does Jaylen Brown turn down $295 million offer? He'd be the first player to turn down a Supermax. Unlikely, but it could happen. Does Jaylen Brown go to Brad Stevens' office? I'm going to ask Adam this and say, hey, execute a sign and trade. I want my money, but I want out too. Could that happen? Maybe. I no longer know, but something tells me that something has to change. The Boston Bruins last year were a really good team with a really established core, or rather, they were a veteran team with an established core, and they elected to move on from Bruce Cassidy. Right? They elected to move on from Bruce Cassidy. They kept the core together, right? The Taylor Hall, the David Pastrnak, the Brad Marchand, the Patrice Bergeron. They kept the core together. They moved on from the coach. It certainly paid huge dividends in the regular season this year, a historic regular season. The Celtics, to me, I think they got to go the opposite direction right now. That's where I'm leaning today. That if they're going to change out something, I'd rather see him change out the players. And I never thought I would say that. Again, I don't know that Mazzulla is the answer. I don't know that. But I'm feeling like he's less of the problem than a lot of other people think he is. I think the players right now are the issue. They're certainly the biggest issue to me in this series. They're certainly the biggest issue to me in this series. I like what Will said about the players having to be accountable. Right now, they're not. Tatum hasn't looked good. Tatum hasn't looked good. Brown hasn't looked good. Horford has looked terrible. I mean, there have been some good things, but by and large, it has not been a good situation. Ralph says they certainly don't have the drive and look of a championship team. No, they don't. Yesterday they quit. There's no doubt, right? Like they gave up yesterday. I don't know if they gave up in the first quarter or they gave up right at the start of the third, but bottom line is they gave up. They got punched in the mouth and refused to fight back. They just started trying. They were down 30. They tried to get all 30 back in one shot. Nothing but jacked up threes. That was their plan most of the second half. Didn't matter who it was, right? Smart, Brown, Tatum, just everybody shoot as many threes as possible early in the shot clock, 5 feet behind the line. Didn't matter. They gave up. They did what we accused Philly of doing in the first of the semifinal round. It's the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV, AM and FM at WDEVradio.com. Adam Kaufman, WBZ News Radio in Boston, again with us about 6:10 here on DEV. I do want to get into something on the Red Sox today, though. Red Sox beat the Padres 2 out of 3. It was a good weekend overall. But I have one big looming question about the Red Sox roster. We'll talk about it next on the Brady Farkas Show, brought to you by Fecto Homes.
WDEV Studio is sponsored by Sticks and Stuff and Swanton Lumber, Vermont's largest independent home center, powered by Marvin Doors and Windows. Go to sticksandstuff.com for store locations and hours. Chloe, put your helmet on.
Okay, Dad.
You work hard to protect your family, but some risks are easy to miss. Mosquito bites can spread germs that cause West Nile virus or Zika virus. Cockroaches leave behind bacteria, as well as allergens that can trigger asthma attacks. Stinging insects send more than 500,000 people to the emergency room every year. Common pests can threaten our health. Learn how to protect your family at pestworld.org. A public service message from the National Pest Management Association and the CDC.
Hey everybody, I'm Lee Cattell. Have your lunch with Brady Farkas and me weekdays on the Midday News Service. The latest local news, Brady's sports report, Roger Hill updates from the Forecast Center, plus business, interviews, and breaking news as it happens. The Midday News Service, weekdays during the noon hour on Vermont's news and sports leader, WDEV FM and AM. Streamed at WDEVradio.com.
Possibilities are all around us. Everywhere we look, we see opportunity in unexpected places. And when we share our knowledge, vision, and connections, we turn great ideas into action in communities all around the world that we call home. Like transforming an old bus to feed hungry children, or providing life-saving equipment to those who need it most. From fighting disease to rebuilding schools, together we can make real change happen. We are Rotary. We are people of action. Get involved today at rotary.org/action.
Local businesses advertise with WDEV because they get results.
I've been advertising on WDEV for a number of years now. It's been a really great spot for me to get my name out.
We're an excellent partner for our advertising dollars.
We jumped at the opportunity and we're so pleased we did. We've experienced incredible results.
Interested in advertising on WDEV? Contact us at WDEV@radiovermont.com.
Make your opinion heard by texting onto the Brady Farkas Show at 802-585-3026.
Now it's back to the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV AM, FM, and WDEVradio.com.
Welcome back, Brady Farkas Show, brought to you by Fecto Homes, WDEV AM and FM, WDEVradio.com. Red Sox baseball tonight. Sox taking on the Angels this game in Anaheim. Shohei Ohtani, Mike Trout and company against the Sox. Tanner Houck pitching in this one against Jaime Barria. Certainly a game in which I would think the Red Sox can hit. The Angels have a formidable offense as well, at least in the middle of the lineup, so they might get to Houck too. But I think the Red Sox would have the advantage here in this one from the hitter versus pitcher matchup. 9:38 first pitch, 8:38 with the pregame show. Sox are going to miss Ohtani in this series on the mound, which is always good news as well. He pitched yesterday, so they won't have to deal with him on the rubber. It was a very good weekend in San Diego, right? Paxton pitched well. Sale pitched well. Paxton goes 6 innings. Sale goes 7 innings. They both go over 100 pitches. We're going to get to that in a minute, but that their performances is good news, are good news, and is encouraging. The Red Sox need to find something to do with Corey Kluber. And I think a lot of you are feeling this as well. Corey Kluber does not belong in the starting rotation right now. Corey Kluber, I believe, after his next start, is going to land on the injured list with some kind of phantom injury. I think Corey Kluber is about to develop some kind of phantom elbow or shoulder issue and is going to end up on the injured list. It feels like the best thing for everybody involved. Corey Kluber at this point is not helping the Boston Red Sox. He went 2 1/3 innings yesterday, stressed the bullpen. He didn't make it out of the 5th. Maybe he did get through 5, but he got pummeled against the Cardinals on Sunday Night Baseball. He's got an ERA of over 6. Corey Kluber has had a phenomenal career. He's a multi-time Cy Young winner. He's a multi-time All-Star. He has had a great career. Corey Kluber right now is washed up. Now, some of you want him DFA'd. Some of you want him sent to the minors. I'm not doing – number one, he won't go to the minors, so that doesn't matter. 2, I'm not DFAing him either. I still believe in depth. You still have a lot of questions in your rotation. I would keep him in the organization, but I would find an injury to make up and put him on the shelf. Because right now, all he's doing is hurting the team. When we thought the Red Sox were going to be bad, it would have been okay to allow a guy out there every 5 days to eat up innings and save your young guys and save your bullpen. And, hey, you're going to go 5, but you're going to give up 6 runs every game. That would have been more okay. You are in this thing now. The Red Sox are very much in the thick of playoff conversation. The Rays are coming back to the pack. The Blue Jays have really struggled. You're out of the cellar. So the division is likely not in play, but it's not so far out of play that you have to punt it yet. And the wild card race, you're going to be in it with your division. You're going to be in it with the Angels. You're going to be in it with Houston. You're going to be in it with Texas. You're going to be in it with Seattle. You are in it. If you are going, and if you're going to be in it, you need your best pieces out there, and Corey Kluber isn't that. He's just not that. He has had a great career. For right now, it looks like it's over. Sale has injury concerns. Paxton has injury concerns. Whitlock has injury concerns. Bayo has innings limit concerns. So you have enough questions in your rotation that I would keep Kluber around, but I would not have him taking the ball every 5th or 6th day right now. I mean, what we saw on Sunday against the Padres was absolute. It was ugly. I mean, it was 86 to 88 miles an hour. Couldn't throw strikes, 3 walks, walked in a run. That's no good. A team that is trying to win, and I believe the Red Sox are, and a team that's in a position to win, and I believe the Red Sox are now, which is different than we thought. If you're that, you can't have what we saw on Sunday. You can't have what we saw on Sunday Night Baseball the week prior against the St. Louis Cardinals. He was bad on opening day against Baltimore, and he's been bad a lot of the season. ERA over 6, 6.3 almost. Okay, this team's already moved Nick Pivetta to the bullpen. Garrett Whitlock is coming back this week. When Whitlock comes back, I'd be wanting to and you go back to a 5-man rotation, I'd be wanting Kluber out of it. And that feels right to me. Again, he's not going to the minors. He's not. I don't believe he should be DFA'd, but I also believe he shouldn't be getting the ball every 5th day. This team is too good to be punting his starts and hurting the bullpen. I mean, they have a new series starting today, and multiple guys had to clean up 6+ innings yesterday. You cannot have that. I know he's a veteran. I know the team likes him. I know the team values him, but he's not helping the team, and I'm sure he's not having any fun. I'm sure he wouldn't mind a mental reset on the injured list. When Whitlock comes back, I'd roll with Whitlock, with Houck, with Bayo, with Paxton, with Sale, and that's it. You've got Pivetta still as depth. You've got Cutter Crawford potentially as depth, and you'd have Kluber as depth. But right now, I don't need that depth, and I don't need Corey Kluber doing what he did. The other thing that surprised me from the Red Sox over the weekend and their pitching was how aggressive Alex Cora was with Chris Sale and with James Paxton. On Friday night, Paxton got over 100 pitches, just his second start back from really barely pitching in 3 years. On Saturday, Sale comes back out and goes the 7th inning, throws 110 plus, I think it was 111. First time he's thrown back-to-back 110 plus outings since 2017. Alex Cora was surprisingly aggressive. And I get it, to get guys over the hump, you have to allow them to meet new challenges. It felt a little quick for me. They did have the extra day because it was a 6-man rotation. They had a full week in between starts. I'm sure that factored into it. But I would have handled especially Paxton with more kid gloves. I am surprised that Alex Cora let them go out. Paxton for the 6th, over 100 pitches. Sale for the 7th, over 110. Again, it's a balancing act between keeping them safe and allowing them to push through things. I think with Paxton especially, I would have been a little more judicious in how I handled things. With Sale, back-to-back starts, I also still would have been a little more judicious. It felt unnecessary, and it felt like an unnecessary risk. I'm not saying pull guys at 85 pitches, But when a guy in Paxton's case has barely pitched in 3 years, running him out there for over 100, having him sit up, one more time and go out and throw warm-up pitches one more time, it didn't feel necessary. It didn't feel necessary. But on the Red Sox front, yeah, Kluber, I think he's destined for an IL trip. It's the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV, AM and FM, WDEVradio.com. We'll get to a text from Peter in Williston. We'll talk about the great weekend of Michael Block as well after the CBS News update. That's next.
WDEV, Vermont's news station, owned and operated by the Radio Vermont Group. From the top of Sugarbush, 96.1 FM, WDEV Northern Waitsfield, 96.5 W243 Barrie, 98.3 W252 CU Montpelier, along with our founding station, AM 550 WDEV Waterbury Montpelier, streaming at WDEVradio.com. 91 years of serving Vermont, the friendly pioneer, WDEV.
This is CBS News on the Hour, presented by Indeed.com.
I'm Monica Ricks in New York. Debt talks are starting at the White House, and President Biden says he is confident they can get a deal done.
We're optimistic we may be able to make some progress because we both agree that default's not really the table of getting something done.
CBS's Nicole Skanga is in Washington.
Our credit card, our debt limit, we have charged so much of it, it's bigger than our economy.
Sources tell CBS News the White House is now offering to keep spending flat from this year to next. Republicans, they say, want to increase defense spending while cutting everything else by up to 22%.
I think we can get a deal tonight, we get a deal tomorrow, but you got to get something done this week to be able to pass it and move it to the Senate.
Congress has less than 2 weeks to pass a deal. According to a new law in Idaho, the man suspected of killing 4 University of Idaho students last year could face a firing squad if he's convicted and ultimately sentenced to death. But CBS's Donya Backus tells us why that could be tough.
The big question here, of course, is motive. What they have to do is put reasonable doubt in one juror's mind, and that is enough for a hung jury.
CBS News analyst Jessica Levinson says no clear motive in absence of a murder weapon could strengthen any defense. Prosecutors now have 60 days to decide whether they'll go for the death penalty.
A not guilty plea was entered for him earlier today. In Atlanta, at least 4 people were injured when a crane partially collapsed on a construction site. Jeffrey Beam saw it happen from a nearby building.
It sounded like a really large truck zooming by, followed by a very large crash, loud enough to shake the whole building.
12 big airports across the country will have to divvy up more than $100 million to pay for improvements like more airfield lighting or new taxiways. The money's coming from the FAA to help reduce any confusion or accidents on runways. New York City says it can't afford to take on more migrants unless they get to work. Here's CBS's Matt Piper.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams says expedited work permits are needed for the thousands of asylum seekers arriving to the Big Apple on a weekly basis.
Right now, we are denying that opportunity by refusing to let them work legally.
He says the White House needs to step in to approve work permits, and the governor says they're necessary to get asylum seekers out of temporary shelters.
Tickets for Taylor Swift's Eras tour have been very expensive, but one fan in Foxborough is hoping to make some of that money back. You may not be able to quite hear it, but Taylor performed through another downpour over the weekend, and that fan started collecting the rain. She's now selling it on Facebook Marketplace for $250 a pop. This is CBS News.
Need to hire quality candidates fast? You need Indeed. Their powerful hiring platform helps you attract, interview, and hire candidates all in one place. Visit Indeed.com/credit.
Yeah, I'm so stressed. Our business is growing. We've got people all over now.
Ooma.
What is that? Meditation?
I'm recommending the Ooma cloud phone system with auto attendant and more than 50 features.
Ooma?
Yep. Switching to Ooma is a cinch. Just $24.95 per month per user, plus taxes and fees.
Ooma.
Now you're feeling it. Find small business calm at ooma.com/radio. That's OOMA.com/radio.
All in one place with shipping supplies and services, so you can fill orders from all over in one stop. Plus, professional print and marketing services at your fingertips. And now during Staples Small Business Deal Days, when rewards members spend $100 or more.
On this Monday, WDEV and the Celtics, and oh boy, do
so obviously, yeah. But so I just want.
But
concern for dog owners. Here's CBS's Jim Krasula.
Parvovirus, or parvo, can infect any dog, but it's especially dangerous, even fatal, for young or unvaccinated dogs, and it's highly contagious. Humans can spread the virus on their hands or clothing, but people are immune to parvo's effects. Veterinarians say dogs often stop eating when first infected, followed by lethargic behavior. Puppies usually show intestinal symptoms, including diarrhea, vomiting, and dehydration. Jim Krasula, CBS News.
Adidas will start selling its remaining Yeezy products next week. That stock is said to be worth more than $1 billion. And more than 450,000 Power XL waffle irons are being recalled. The stuffed waffleizer has burned dozens of users when officials say hot batter spills out during use. Monica Ricks, CBS News.
Want Brady to hear your opinion on the sports stories of the day? Text in at 802-585-3026.
Now it's back to the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV AM, FM, and WDEVradio.com.
Welcome back in, Brady Farkas Show, right here on WDEV, brought to you by Fecta Homes. About 5 minutes or so away from Adam Kaufman joining us, our favorite Celtics insider, over at WBZ News Radio in Boston, and also the host of the Celtics Beat podcast. All right, text line open, 802-585-3026. Will in Plattsburgh back again. He says, it's not just the Celtics are losing, but it's how they've lost. Lack of effort. They don't deserve to win. Where is Tatum? Where is everybody, really? I mean, and it's interesting because everybody can point to Grant Williams and Friday night and poking the bear and Jimmy Butler and all that. At least Grant Williams had some fight. At least Grant Williams had some heart. Now, you can argue that it was misplaced, that it was misguided. You got to let sleeping dogs lie. I would have that discussion with you. But at least Grant Williams showed something, right? Most of the rest of the series, the Celtics haven't showed anything. First half of game one, they were great. First half of game one, they were great. They came out listless in the second half. They came out listless in the second half yesterday. They were listless in the fourth quarter on Friday. They have not put together, clearly, a full 48 minutes yet. It was the thing we asked them to do on Friday before we left. They haven't done it. Texter says, on the Red Sox, with chances of Red Sox being in contention, do you think that the Red Sox ought to trade for Ohtani and just go for it with him? No. One, I don't think the Red Sox are good enough to win the World Series. I don't. They are good enough to be in the playoffs. That would be an accomplishment given where we thought they were. They're not good enough to win the World Series. If you're not good enough to win the World Series, you don't go after Ohtani. I don't think they're one Ohtani away from the World Series either. I don't. Maybe on July 10th, I'll feel differently about it. I also don't think the Red Sox have what it takes to get Ohtani, right? Like, they've worked so hard to build up the farm system, and I know you can't hoard these guys forever, but, like, unless you're giving up Marcelo Meyer and every other top prospect you have, I don't think you have what it takes to get Ohtani, and I'm not saying it's not worth it, but it's probably not something I would do if you're not going to win the World Series. And then I don't think the Angels are going to trade Ohtani right now because right now they're in it. Like, they're in it as well. So I don't think their motivation is that high to trade Ohtani at this point. Texter says the Michael Block story is going to be a great book and a great movie. I got to tell you, I was riveted yesterday by all of the PGA Championship. I am not someone who watches a lot of golf. I like to play golf. I do not like to watch golf. Right? I will watch the majors. I will watch on Sunday if it's close. I will watch Saturday a little bit, but that's really it for me. I loved what I saw yesterday on a couple of different fronts. Yesterday had something for everybody. Yesterday at the PGA Championship is the reason that we love sports, are the reasons that we love sports, right? The old quote is, how can you not be romantic about baseball? How could you not be romantic about what you saw yesterday? Michael Block, who I get it, he's a PGA, a club pro. He certainly is around the game. He has access to the game. But by and large, he felt like you and me. He doesn't get to play it professionally. He doesn't play it every weekend. He doesn't play in tournaments all around the world. He certainly doesn't play with players the caliber of the players he played with over the course of the last 4 days. He felt like he was representing the everyman, right? The everyman isn't really represented in the NBA. The everyman isn't really represented in Major League Baseball. The everyman isn't really represented in hockey. The everyman can be represented in golf, and it was this weekend in the form of Michael Block, who look, he beat the entire U.S. Ryder Cup team. Xander Schauffele, he beat him. Jordan Spieth, he beat him. Guys who have won majors, guys who were supposed to win majors. Michael Block beat him. Michael Block played with Rory McIlroy and finished just 2 strokes behind him for the tournament, I believe. Hit a hole-in-one on 15. It's incredible what he did. Not only that he made the tournament, not only that he made the cut, but that he got to play, I believe, with Jason Day, if I'm remembering correctly, on Saturday, but definitely Rory on Sunday. And he's, in it enough to be interesting. And he plays on 15. And now the story has gotten better, right? He finishes tied for 15th. He gets automatically back next year because of it. He's stolen the golf world's kind of hearts, and he got invited to multiple other PGA events this year because now people just want him at their tournament. Like, this is great. His son sending the picture into CBS or sending the video to CBS of his home club in California saying, like, this is the best moment of my life. Like, how are you not? If you weren't tearing up at that, you've got to be the Grinch. I was tearing up watching Michael Block tear up. Like, that's why we love sports. The idea of the lovable underdog, the idea that anybody can win, the idea that anybody can be there. It was great. Texter says McIlroy's reaction to the hole-in-one was priceless, even if it was an expletive. Yeah, it was. And the idea, too, like, Rory McIlroy has done almost everything he can do, right? Rory McIlroy has won majors, played with Tiger Woods, been ranked a top player in the world, played with all the other top players in the world. And Rory McIlroy was even falling in love with the Michael Block story. The idea that the superstar is worshiping the everyman, if even just for a day, if even just for a hole. That's romantic stuff. And then the Koepka story, that's why we love sports too, because whatever side of this you're on, Koepka plays the things that we love. If you are somebody that hates live golfers and wants everybody on the live tour banished, into the sun, then you had a great villain in Brooks Koepka, right? Brooks Koepka, the villain, representing live, the tour that you hate, the tour that's undoing everything that's great about golf. If you're somebody who just likes comeback stories, then Koepka was for you too. A guy who was out of it mentally, a guy who was out of it physically, a guy who we never were sure if he was going to get back there, him continuing his reascension, his reassimilation, that was the storyline also. I don't know what side of the Koepka and live debate you're on, but whatever side you were on, it was great. He's either the biggest villain or he's the great comeback story on the heels of the Michael Block story, the great story of perseverance. I'm happy for Koepka. I don't have hatred for the live guys like a lot of you do. Part of it is because I just don't like golf watching it professionally like a lot of you do. I would probably feel very different if this were basketball, or this were baseball, or this were football, or this were hockey. I might feel very, very different, but I don't have a strong opinion towards the live guys because I'm not watching golf anyways, so it's not like these guys are missing from the tournaments I care about. They all play the majors. That's what matters to me. But I like Koepka. He seems like a likable guy. He seems like a fun guy. He's hanging out with the guys on Barstool. He seems a little more relatable than some of the other stuffiness that goes on the PGA Tour. So I'm happy for Koepka. Texter says, good point. About Koepka, his career could have been ruined by injury in addition to the ire he's drawn from live. I'm sure some people absolutely think that Koepka was a villain. But villains, that plays well too. That plays well too. You know what's not playing well? The Boston Celtics. Celtics down 3-0 now in the Eastern Conference Finals. Their season feels effectively over. Adam Kaufman, WBZ News Radio in Boston, is with us now. Adam, I'd ask how you're doing, but you're probably doing a lot like I am doing, dejected and despondent, but appreciate you making time for us. What's going on, my man? Welcome back.
Yeah, abundantly clear so your listeners understand kind of how this works. You're here, you're doing this because you are paid to do so, obviously. I'm here not because this is a subject matter I want to discuss by any, because I am not paid to be here with you right now. I am here because I like you. I am here because I enjoy your program. I am here to, help. Maybe this can be like therapy for the two of us and relates to what's going on with the Celtics, but it is not because, this is an enjoyable subject matter at this moment.
It's certainly not. Celtics are down 3-0. Nobody's ever come back from 3-0 down in the NBA. We know what's happened in other sports. It has never happened in the NBA. And let me just ask you an overarching question. What part of this beatdown is most disappointing to you?
I would say, I guess to answer that in a grander sort of way, it's that they have not largely, the Celtics, shown up for this series. That is the disappointing part. It's because I think most people can agree, even with the 3 games that we've watched so far, the Celtics are the better team. They are the more talented team. They are the deeper team. But what they are not, very clearly, is the more composed and mentally tough team, and the team that seems to have any urgency or appreciation for the moment. I mean, if for the gamblers out there, Vegas had Boston as overwhelming favorites going into this series. Even down 0-2, it was still basically even money for Boston to come back and win this series. Game 4 now in Miami is the first game that Boston is even an underdog for this series, and it's like a 1.5. The respect for this Celtics team, or disrespect for the Heat team, or somewhere in the middle, I don't know, is jarring from a Vegas standpoint. But I think a lot of that extends to just national media or local media. I can't tell you the number of people that I heard going in saying this is going to be a sweep, or this is going to be a gentleman's sweep. And yeah, there's Jimmy Butler on the other side, but what does he have around him? And I just, for anyone that does listen to my podcast, we warned you. I for months, truly for months, I have been saying, I don't want to see Miami in the playoffs. When they were in the play-in tournament against Atlanta, I said, I hope the Hawks win. I don't want to see Miami in the first round. I don't want to see Miami get by Milwaukee. I don't want to see Miami get by the Knicks, even though I thought they would. I don't want to see it. And then going into this series, some of it maybe was even at the time, it felt like an irrational amount of Jimmy Butler PTSD from what we've seen from him last year in the playoffs, even though the Red Sox, I'm thinking about teams to come back from down 3-0. Even though the Celtics, won, obviously, it took 7 games and Butler was incredible in that series. Or going back to, obviously, the bubble series a few years ago during the height of COVID, there's so much evidence that would tell you the Heat can beat the Celtics. And it's not just they're coached by the best coach in the NBA in Eric Spoelstra, or, Pat Riley's the head of the snake and everything filters down, or Jimmy Butler's not scared of anyone. There are a lot of different things you could point to as just, even without a Tyler Hero, if they get hot from 3, they can kill you. And unfortunately, sort of circling back to your main question, the Celtics, we have through 3 games not even seen them play at their average. And that would tell you, if you're looking for a reason to be confident, that would tell you, hey, water's got to find its level at some point, doesn't it? The Celtics need to play like themselves for the better part of a game at some point, don't they? And yeah, they do. They may take game 4. They may take 4 and 5. But if you believe that they are going to do something that has literally never been done in 149 chances in NBA history, which has come back from down 3-0 in a playoff series in a best-of-7 to win, nothing that they have shown us throughout this series. I know people want to point back to Game 6 against Philly and Game 7 against Philly, but nothing in this series against this team has shown us they are capable of doing that.
You've been in sports media for a long time, and every time we talk about the NBA, we say the following thing. The NBA is a players' league. The NBA is a players' league. The NBA is a star-driven league. And we often will disparage, well, anybody could have won with those players, and the coaching doesn't really matter. So if it's a players' league and the coaching doesn't really matter, why is Joe Mazzulla getting bagged on so much today?
Coaches are easy scapegoats. And when you look at a guy who's 34 years old with no NBA head coaching experience coming into this year and very minimal experience on the bench as an assistant, and prior to reaching the NBA ranks, it's not like he played in the league or even, coached at a high level of college. Like, Joe Mazzulla isn't Brad Stevens, who also had no NBA experience, not even as an assistant, and didn't play in the league, but at least, he coached many years in college basketball. He went to multiple national championship games with Butler. Ime Udoka had no NBA head coaching experience, but he played in the league for a decade. He was on the bench as an assistant for a decade. Joe Mazzulla isn't even really a combination of those two guys. He just sort of was thrust into a situation where he was, and I do think is, in NBA circles, a well-respected, viewed as a rising star in the league, was, interviewed for the job in Utah along with his, at the time, co-assistant Will Hardy, who obviously got the head coaching job, but, viewed as a guy that, he can do it. He's going to be a good coach in this league. He's going to be a, Spoelstra type. And let's remember, Eric Spoelstra has been around for 20 years or whatever it's been. Eric Spoelstra did not win a title in year one. At least I don't think he did. I'm trying to remember back to, Shaq and Wade and what year that was as related to Spoelstra and all that. But, it wasn't this immediate gratification for Eric Spoelstra. He had to build toward it. There were growing pains along the way for him to get to the point where he is at right now. And fair criticism would be, and I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth here, fair criticism would be saying, Joe, how do you not have these guys ready for this moment? He kept saying post-game, it's on me, it's on me, it's on me. How do you not have these guys ready? But I say that, and I also say this, and I feel more strongly about this. This team, different head coach, but this team reached the NBA Finals last year with largely the same core. Quite frankly, a slightly inferior core. Malcolm Brogdon wasn't on that team. He was, and he's been abysmal the last couple of games, but he was a great addition, sixth man of the year. That team reached the NBA Finals and defecated all over itself. Did not show up the way it needed to against Golden State. Did they blow it or choke? I wouldn't call it a choke, but it was certainly a missed opportunity. It was a very winnable series against a Warriors team that I believe the Celtics were better than. And the players had all offseason to stew over that. Had all this season, the regular season, to stew over that. Took too long against the Sixers to win. Took too long prior to that against the Hawks to win. Both cases took their competition a little too lightly. And I think walked into this Miami series and said, the road is paved for us. We're good. We're going to reach the NBA Finals. We're going up against Denver or LA, and we're better than those teams too. This is our time. This is our year. And they were embarrassed in game one. Jaylen Brown said post-game, we treated it like a regular season game. We played it too cool. Game two, they choked away. In game three, it's like they didn't even get on the flight to Miami. Mm-hmm. They were never even in that game. And I don't understand, to a man, when you're just talking about pride. Like Jaylen said post-game, we got to come out in game four and play with pride. To a man, I don't understand how last year isn't in your mind at all times right now. You need to go out and respond. You have something to prove. And in this playoff series, they've done that. And they've not done that. And that is not on a coach to motivate you to remember what happened to you less than a year ago. That's on you. As a professional athlete, as a player, Joe Mazzulla's not out there not putting in the effort on rebounds. Joe Mazzulla's not out there making Al Horford and Jaylen Brown miss every shot they take when they are wide open. Joe Mazzulla is not making Malcolm Brogdon or Tatum or Smart or Brown or whoever literally throw the ball to the other team like they're wearing your same jersey. There's only so much you can put on Joe Mazzulla. You want to talk about certain in-game adjustments or lineup switches or rotations, or why wasn't Grant a bigger part earlier? Or why did you not go away from the double big earlier? Or why is Derek White not on the floor versus Brogdon? Or why hasn't Hauser gotten a look? Like, Joe Mazzulla is not infallible, and Joe Mazzulla may very well lose his job after this season. Although I'm skeptical of that, maybe we'll get to that. But he's not the top of the blame pie for people who like to make those charts. It's the players. The players have blown this opportunity in a big, big way.
Adam Kaufman, WBZ News Radio and Boston Celtics Beat podcast with us here on the Brady Farkas Show. You tweeted something very interesting yesterday during the post-game press conference. You're like, I want an unfiltered Jaylen Brown right now, something to that effect. I've gone back and forth with Jaylen Brown. When the Ringer piece came out a couple months ago, I thought Jaylen Brown was going to want to leave. Like, if they didn't win the whole thing, I thought Jaylen Brown was going to want to leave. Then we find out he's all NBA, he's Supermax eligible. I'm like, okay, well, now he's going to stay because no one's ever turned down the Supermax. Now I'm wondering if he's going to go into Brad Stevens' office and demand the sign and trade, that we saw so prominently 7 years ago or so. Where do you think Jaylen Brown is at right now, and what do you think he's feeling right now? Because he certainly seems like the guy who's the most frustrated by the situation.
They don't collectively seem like a group that believes in the coach, which is the only thing to me that could really cost Mazzulla his job. Because I do think Brad Stevens believes in him. I think ownership doesn't want to pay another head coach to go away again in back-to-back years.
Yep.
They only just months ago took off the interim title and gave him the job and gave him a contract extension, and maybe look bad for doing so before the end of the season after all this played out. Because if he didn't have that, if he was still the interim right now, makes it a lot easier obviously to not even get rid of him, like just put him back as an assistant and let him continue to grow in the league, if unless he had a head coaching opportunity elsewhere. But honestly, he probably wouldn't at this right now. He would eventually, but not in this moment. So I think the group as a whole, it sort of feels like they've started to tune him out, or whatever, however you want to frame it. As it relates to Jaylen specifically, I think he is chief among them. Jaylen Brown does not seem like someone who believes in what they're doing right now. He doesn't seem like he believes in Joe Mazzulla. He doesn't seem like he believes in the way they're coming out and playing in terms of game planning and strategies and philosophies. He doesn't, obviously they've gotten away from their identity of defense. And people want to say, like, well, why have players lost their defense-only identity? Well, Joe Mazzulla, and this is a reasonable second-guessing question of Mazzulla, and it was along the way throughout the regular season. He took that away from them. They switched to what has, finally been termed Mazzulla ball by some in the fan base, where it's offense is going to drive our ship. Whereas last year, defense was their identity, and it really wasn't at all throughout this year. And except maybe in spurts. And obviously, they turned it up defensively in Games 6 and 7 against Philly when they put Rob Williams back in the starting lineup. But generally speaking, they didn't lose their defensive identity like during this Miami series. They lost it the second Mazzulla took over, because he decided to play a different style of basketball. And for a long time, it worked. And for the first third of the season, it was incredible. And nobody missed Ime Udoka. I promised you. If you think back to what was going on at the time when they got off to whatever, like a 21-5 start or something like that. Like Mazzulla was, he was God's gift. He was, he was Nate from Ted Lasso. He was, the wonder kid, right? It just So I think some of that goes back to Jaylen. And then obviously you have all of the external issues that go beyond what happens on the floor. The fact that they have tried to trade him multiple times. The fact that, obviously there are race issues in Boston, that he as a man, he as a business owner, he is a person is, rightfully uncomfortable with, and only he can speak to that. I can't, you can't, we can't put ourselves in Jaylen Brown's shoes or anybody else's for that matter. But Jaylen, he does sort of seem like he is, if the Supermax were not a thing, if he wasn't staring down an almost $300 million contract that he was eligible for this season, this offseason, then he might be looking to leave. And could he go into Brad Stevens' office, as you said, and demand the sign and trade? He could. And I'm just sort of at a point where nothing will surprise me with with this offseason and this team. You know, I would have been floored if they had traded Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant last offseason, you know, because you're coming off the finals, you got a young core, as opposed to an, aging superstar who's still elite but has an injury history. It didn't register. It didn't make sense at the time. But now you factor in the new CBA and how much it's going to cost you to keep these guys and what kind of team you're actually capable of putting around them. I mean, Stevens and Zarin and ownership and all, everybody involved in basketball ops, they may decide they want to move on from Jaylen Brown, not because of Jaylen Brown, but because of how you need to build a team going forward in this league. It just might make the most sense to deal him because he is a top 10 player by all NBA standards. He is a top 10 player in this league right now who you can get something for. You can get really good pieces for, whether it's high draft picks and players or a superstar player, whatever it is. You can move Jaylen Brown and get pieces in return that will keep you in contending status. And I think they're going to think long and hard about that this offseason, especially if they go down in 4 games against Miami, because I don't know about you, and I certainly don't know about basketball ops, but my confidence in this group has been severed for this year. And my confidence in this core, to some degree, is deeply in question.
Do you feel like you have to make a move? Like, do you feel like you can just run this back? We saw the Bruins last year think, hey, we have a good team. It's time to move on from the coach. We need a different voice in the room. Is it time for the Celtics to do the opposite? Not blow it up entirely, but make a move that changes the dynamic.
Well, keep in mind, too, the Bruins didn't, perfectly run it back. They brought in David Krejci, a legitimate second-line center. I realize, he sort of gets lumped in because he was a known commodity, but they didn't have him the previous year. There were external additions, especially those that were added throughout the regular season when they were so good, whether it was Bertuzzi and Orlov and Hathaway and so on. It wasn't just a blind, let's bring back the whole thing. And maybe you're talking about that sort of in the same way with the Celtics. You're bringing back Tatum, Brown, Smart, maybe even Rob Williams, and around that, everything else is in question, and that would still be considered running it back because your larger, more important core is intact, and that's fair. I guess if they go down, I wouldn't have said this going into the series. I would have said, if they go down to the Heat, it's probably a 6 or 7 game series. It's hard fought, and so whatever, a good matchup. You lost, and that sucks. That's a disappointment. This would be a failure. If to go down this way, especially if it happens in 4 or 5 games where you're just in one of the next 2 games, if it even goes that far, you're completely lifeless, like what we've seen throughout the large part of this series. I don't see how you can bring back the same core even with a different coach, because that would be the 4th coach in 4 years, and the previous 3 generally didn't get anything different out of them. Brad Stevens, who I think was a very, very good head coach in the NBA, and will be again if he so chooses. They sort of went out with a whimper under him too. Ime Udoka, same deal. Joe Mazzulla, we're living it. So at a certain point in time, it's not the coach, it's the players. And I'm past that point. But for anyone that out there that needs to be convinced, look at the last few years, look at the track record. I don't see how you can not question the core.
Adam Kaufman, WBZ News Radio and Boston Celtics Beat Podcast. Adam, appreciate you going a little long with us, but it was so good I wanted to keep asking you questions. So appreciate you making some time for us on this Monday. We'll watch Game 4. I frankly would rather watch Michael Block pulling one videos over and over for 3 hours instead of Game 4, but we'll be watching it and we'll catch up down the road.
Absolutely, always do. Adam Kaufman, WBZ News Radio in Boston. For my money, he is the best when it comes to talking Celtics. And we've had a lot of them on, right? Abby Chin from NBC Sports Boston was on with us last year. She was phenomenal. She's great on TV. Scal's great. Eddie House is great. Perk is great. For my money, Adam Kaufman is the guy I enjoy talking Celtics to the most. There's a lot there. There is a lot there to unpack. Texter says, great interview with Adam. A very informative talk that you two are having. Thank you very much. Well, you're welcome. Don't thank me. Thank Adam for saying yes for coming on, and thank Adam for knowing his stuff and so well and being so good. There's a lot to digest there. What I take away the most from that interview, I think, is what I said earlier. Adam Kaufman is more inclined to move on from players than he is to just run it back with all the same players and bring in a new coach. This team seems very, very fractured. And I don't think that you can just get that back. You know I'm a Seahawks fan, right? Now, the Seahawks are a little bit different because the Seahawks won a Super Bowl. They won the Super Bowl in 2013. But in 2014, after the Malcolm Butler interception, that team really, really splintered, right? The defense felt like the head coach made a mistake. The defense felt like the offensive coordinator made a mistake. The defensive guys, Richard Sherman namely, thought that Pete Carroll wanted Russell Wilson to throw it so that Russell Wilson could be the hero, and then he didn't hold Russell Wilson accountable for a bad throw, and that team fractured. It had a lot of really good players, right, on that team. Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill and Richard Sherman and Cam Chancellor and Earl Thomas, the Legion of Boom, and Russell Wilson and Marshawn Lynch and Doug Baldwin. That team was never the same. After that Super Bowl, that core was broken. Now, yes, they had one in the bag already, so it's a different situation, but it's not that different. We've seen where cores that are really good and really talented with strong personalities, they just break. They just break. And the Seahawks tried to keep it together, right? They tried to bring everybody back, and it was never the same, right? The voices got louder. The dissension got louder. The dislike of Russ got a little more pronounced, and the team would win 11 games, in 10 games, in 9 games, and then it just kind of wilted away. And they'd win 10 again, and they tried to eventually choose Pete and Russ, and that didn't work until you see the breakup that they had with Russ before last season. The core for the Celtics, to me, just seems broken. And for the first time ever, I am thinking now, the right answer, the best answer, is to move off of a core, is to move off of this core. Now, I don't know exactly how that's going to get done. I had somebody text in earlier in the show and ask about, Brady, can you explain a sign and trade? A sign and trade is complicated, and it's been made more difficult in the last few years. I'll try to do this as quickly and as concisely as I can. A sign and trade is exactly what it sounds like, first and foremost. You sign a player, and then you immediately deal him, right? You sign a player, and then you immediately deal him. Okay. So the Celtics can sign Jaylen Brown to the most lucrative contract possible. In a sign and trade, Jaylen Brown's not eligible for the biggest contract possible because he wouldn't be playing for the Celtics. Even if he signs with the Celtics, he's not eligible for the big Supermax contract. It's still good, but I think it's 4 years instead of 5. It's just the way it works in the collective bargaining agreement. So there's really not motivation on Jaylen Brown's part to want to be a part of a sign and trade, right? Like, if he can't get the money, the bigger money, he'd rather just be an unrestricted free agent and just go sign with the team rather than have a team get made worse, by dealing away key pieces for him. So there's not real motivation for Jaylen Brown. The team he's going to gets worse by trading things for him, and he doesn't get the big money. So that's not great. The acquiring team would obviously rather, hey, if we're going to pay him the same money, we'd like to just pay rather than give up a bunch of assets for him as well. So you're not getting a ton if you're the Celtics in a sign and trade. The Celtics can offer Jaylen Brown the Supermax, but he doesn't have to accept it, and he can just become a free agent after next year, right? Like, he's not going to be a free agent this year. He's not going to be a free agent this year. He's still got 1 year left. The Celtics can say, hey, we'll run it back. The Celtics can say, hey, we'll trade you now, trade for 1 year. And maybe that's a good point too. I had my timing a little off. He's eligible to get the Supermax now. Celtics don't have to offer it now. The Celtics could just trade him with the 1 year left and go to a team and say, hey, that's the point. Yes, I was a little off in my timing. That kind of reshapes how I feel about this. Jaylen Brown, 1 year left on his contract. If another team wants to go and give up something to have Jaylen Brown for 1 year, I would be willing to do that. And I never was before. Now, are you going to get commensurate value for Jaylen Brown? Probably not, but you're going to end up saving at some point $295 million. Texter says, perfect comparison of the Celtics and the Seahawks. When team chemistry is dissolved, it's time to make serious changes. Maybe the Celtics can get Damian Lillard for Jaylen Brown. So this is interesting, and I have to do a little more research on this. In the NBA, contracts have to match up. You have to have almost even money switches. Damian Lillard, as I believe, has a bunch of years left on his contract. So for the 1 year, they're probably close to even. But in terms of total money left, I don't know if that matters because Lillard's is much more than Brown, because Brown has 1 year left at whatever, and Lillard has several years left. Maybe it's just a 1 to 1 year thing, and that might be true. So would I rather have Damian Lillard? Not really, because Damian Lillard is older. Damian Lillard doesn't play a lot of defense. Damian Lillard has been hurt. And scoring hasn't been the Celtics' problem, right? Like, this is the other thing that gets hard, is that I don't know exactly who's out there that you could go get. But with 1 year left, if a team's willing to acquire Jaylen Brown, I would be looking at it. As for the sign and trade, there's not really a whole lot in that for Brown or for an acquiring team. It would be nice for the Celtics to get something for him. But again, you could just trade him now and get something for him. So it's confusing. I got myself a little confused there thinking about when the Supermax eligibility was in the end of the contract. I apologize for that. Jaylen Brown has 1 year left on his deal. I would be willing to trade him with 1 year left on his deal to an acquiring team that wants to have Jaylen Brown for 1 year left, and I get something and free up money in the future. Because this core, I don't think can get over that trust. I just don't think they can get over that lack of trust or those issues. Thanks to Adam Kaufman for joining us here on the Brady Farkas Show on WDEV, AM and FM, and WDEVradio.com. I asked Adam this question. I'll answer it myself as well. The most disappointing part of all of this for me is just the lack of fight. Because I said all along, the only thing that can hamper the Celtics against the Heat is a lack of heart, a lack of focus, and a lack of effort. And that's what we've seen. We've seen this team commit turnovers, lack of focus. We've seen them lose shooters, lack of execution, lack of effort defensively. And we've seen them really not have a whole lot of punch in them beyond the first half of game one. Right? Now, Grant Williams had some fight in the second half of game two. But the whole team had fight first half game one. Grant Williams had fight game two. Beyond that, there hadn't been a whole lot of resistance to what Miami's trying to do. They have imposed their will, and that was the frustrating thing. On talent alone, Miami's not better than the Celtics. But it's not all about talent. And Miami's proving that, and they have just pummeled you in every way for the last 2.5 games. You won first half game one. You look great. Since then, not really. A couple amazing stats out of this, by the way, I ran across today. The Heat had 44 regular season wins, which is 13 less wins than the Celtics had. They had 57. This is the Miami's 13 fewer wins are the most ever by a team to go up 3-0 in a best-of-7 series in NBA history. That's not history I want to be a part of. And Miami was the lowest scoring offense in the NBA this year. I don't know if people realize that. Miami was the lowest scoring offense in terms of points per game. Only two teams that ever in history were the lowest scoring offenses in the NBA and got to the finals. And it hasn't happened in 60 years. The 1964 Warriors were the fewest points per game and got to the finals, and the 1956 Pistons. That is how rare what is happening is. The Miami Heat are the lowest scoring offense in the league. They put up 128 on you in game 3. They put up 120 plus in game 1. Ugly. Ugly, ugly, ugly. And the Celtics have had no answers. I thought the Heat were going to walk the ball up the court and try to play 85-79 games because they couldn't score. Now, they've been willing to play a track meet, and they have beaten you at every single part of this. The Brady Farkas Show, brought to you by Effecto Homes here on WDEV, AM and FM, WDEVradio.com. Another question, good question from a texter. We'll get to that. We'll come back. We'll also start to get you ready for the Red Sox. We're taking on the Angels coming up tonight at 8:38 with the pregame show. That's next on DEV.
Let's personally thank our customers and congratulate our team for reaching and exceeding our goal in the car, truck, and SUV challenge. Right, kid?
That's right. With a record start of the year here at Lamoille Valley Ford, I've got some exciting news to share with you. During the first part of the year, Ford leasing deals have improved dramatically. With new Ford incentives just announced, they just got even better. I want you to know, at Lamoille Valley Ford, it's a great time for you to lease for less. Listen to this. With $3,900 cash or trade down plus fees, returning lessees can get a low mileage 2-year lease on a brand new 2023 F-150 SCX Supercab for just $399 per month. And folks, our inventory of new Fords is absolutely massive. I just counted 14 new Explorers, 32 Bronco and Bronco Sports, and over 160 new Ford trucks in stock and on the way. Our team is ready to do whatever it takes to earn your business at Lamoille Valley Ford.
Woo! So drive from 14, 15, or 16 to Hardwick, Vermont, and lease for less at Lamoille Valley Ford, and spread the word, folks. At Lamoille Valley Ford, we know price matters.
Join Central Vermont Council on Aging for a creative aging celebration Friday, June 2nd from 2:30 to 7:30 p.m. at Vermont College of Fine Arts. This free community event, held during Montpelier's Art Walk, features an open gallery exhibit of creative work by older artists in Central Vermont, plus fun live workshops and participatory activities for everybody. Visit cvcoa.org for a full schedule and details. Central Vermont Council on Aging, cvcoa.org.
A driver who isn't wearing their seatbelt, make it a ticket. A driver who isn't wearing their seatbelt during a crash may not make it home. Don't risk it. Click it or ticket. Paid for by NHTSA.
Whether you own a local business or a global one, you're always looking for ways to position your operation to create opportunities and move on them faster. With Bank of America, you get access to experts, award-winning insights, and business solutions so powerful, you'll make every move matter, locally and globally. Visit bankofamerica.com/banking for business to learn more. What would you like the power to do? Copyright 2023 Bank of America, N.A.
A driver who isn't wearing their seatbelt may get a ticket. A driver who isn't wearing their seatbelt during a crash may not make it home. Don't risk it. Click it or ticket. Paid for by NHTSA.
This is David Goodman. Join me every Wednesday at 1 o'clock for the Vermont Conversation, brought to you by vtdigger.org, Vermont's nonprofit news source. I'll talk with national and local change makers from the worlds of politics, social and racial justice, science, education, and the environment for having an impact on our daily lives. You can also hear the Vermont Conversation at vtdigger.org or sign up for our podcast. Join me and take part in the Vermont Conversation Wednesdays at 1 here on WDEV.
New England Municipal Resource Center, NEMU, with a belief that local businesses like WDEV build strong communities.
For some people, all they need to know about weather is the high temperature for the day. But if you're one of those people who really wants to understand the hows and whys of weather, especially here in the Green Mountain State, then Roger Hill's Weather Classroom podcast is for you. Some of the topics I'll explore are the types of precipitation, global temperature averages, and tropical cyclones. Roger Hill's Weather Classroom podcast is available at WDEVradio.com, Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music.
The Brady Farkas Show now has an interactive text line, so reach out now at 802-585-3026.
Now it's back to the The Brady Farkas Show on WDEV AM, FM, and WDEVradio.com.
Welcome back in, Brady Farkas Show, right here on WDEV, AM and FM, and WDEVradio.com. Go up until 7 o'clock. Full show tonight, obviously. Just a couple minutes left. Jazz with George Thomas, and he's on. He gets a taste of the abbreviated show world today. He's on until 8:38. Yes, the random West Coast start time. 8:38 pregame show, 9:38 with the first pitch there from Angels Stadium in Anaheim. I'll have the lineups for you, at least for the Red Sox here in just a couple of minutes. But a couple of good texts coming in here on the text line. Keep them coming, 802-585-3026. Texter says, Brady, you've been quite down and fairly accurate about the Celtics thus far today. But let me ask you this. Do you see any way they come back and win? No, I don't see any way they come back and win. They've had their teeth kicked in and shown no resolve here for 2.5 games. So no, I don't think they'll win. I don't think they'll win 4 out of 5. That said, I cannot call it impossible, okay? I cannot call it impossible because we've seen these things happen before in sports. 3-0, you've come back in hockey. 3-0 has happened in baseball. It happened with the Red Sox. We've seen a 16 seed beat a 1, not once, but twice. We've seen the Patriots come back from 28-3. So I have seen crazy things happen in sports all the time. I just saw Michael Block get a hole-in-one playing with Rory McIlroy. So can it happen? Yes. Will it happen? I don't believe so. If you're looking for a path to believing it, look, you win this game on South Beach, maybe the Heat overlook you, take you a little too nonchalant, they think you're dead. Okay, you steal game 4, no big deal. Now you're home for game 5. Now you win that with your backs against the wall. And now maybe you get Miami to feel a little pressure and you go back there and you try to win game 6 and then you got game 7 at home. I mean, there is your path. But no, I don't believe it's going to happen. The Celtics have played so poorly. And they do appear to be fractured. And they do appear to be disconnected. And they don't appear to be all in either on Joe Mazzulla, with each other, or both. But if you're asking me to design the best possible outcome, I just did it. Steal game 4, game 5 at home, game 7 at home. Could you win a game 6? Possible. Kyle in South Burlington says, how about trading both stars and rebooting? No. No. In the NBA, you long for one generational player. You long for one All-NBA player. The Celtics have 2. Getting rid of one of them would seem sacrilege. They just might have to. But in the NBA, if you blow it all up, it takes you a really long time. Okay? It takes you a really long time in the NBA to find homegrown players again. It's not going to happen. Okay? In the NBA, we're all rooting for a homegrown core. Celtics have it. They haven't capitalized on it yet, but you don't blow it all up. You just don't. Okay? You can move on from Horford when it becomes appropriate. You can move on from Brogdon when it becomes appropriate. But as far as moving on from both Tatum and Brown, that's not happening. Tatum, to me, he's going to stay. He's going to be in Boston for a lot of his career. He's going to sign the Supermax deal, and that after next season, and that's going to be that. He's not going anywhere. Jaylen Brown is the guy who would go somewhere. I mean, look, you saw what Oklahoma City did, right? They blew up the Durant-Westbrook core, and well, look, they got a lot of draft picks now, and they seem exciting, but it's going to end up having been like 6-7 years before they're even relevant. Okay? Look at Brooklyn. Brooklyn tried with Durant and with Kyrie. They're going to be, I'm not saying irrelevant, but it's going to be really hard for them with no draft picks to get back into the mix. I do not want that to be the Celtics. Absolutely not do I want that to be the Boston Celtics. Okay, 802-585-3026. Yeah, Texter says that frees $500 million if you get rid of them. Don't care. You got to pay somebody in the NBA. You got to pay somebody. All right, Red Sox lineups. Sox are 26-21. The Angels are 25-23. Both teams right now are in the mix for a playoff spot as we get near the 50-game mark, which is the 1/3 mark of the season. Angels don't have their lineup out yet, but we know that Jaime Barria is the starting pitcher. He's 1-1 with a 1.96. Tanner Houck pitches for the Red Sox, 3-3 with a 5.48. Alex Verdugo leads off in right, hitting 296, 5 homers, 19 ribbies. Masataka Yoshida is in left, hitting 303, 6 homers, 28 ribbies. Justin Turner's the DH. That's good. He's back in the lineup after leaving the lineup the other day. Remember, he left on, I think it was Friday night with that leg tightness. He's back hitting 279. Devers is in third, hitting 253 with the 13 homers, and he's second in the majors in RBIs at 44. Jaron Duran's hitting 330. He bats fifth. Tristan Casas is at 180. He's trying to claw his way to the Mendoza line. He plays first and hits sixth. Enmanuel Valdez had the big homer the other night on Saturday. He's at second base and bats seventh. Pablo Reyes is at shortstop. He bats eighth. No Kike Hernandez today. Connor Wong is the catcher. He bats ninth. He's got the 4 home runs and 11 RBIs. For the Angels, here's what we know. We don't know what the lineup is. I know that Ohtani's going to be in it. I know Trout's going to be in it. And I know Hunter Renfroe is likely to be in it, and he's having a very good year as well. The Angels have some power. They don't have the depth offensively that the Red Sox have, but we will see what happens. Remember, we saw the Angels earlier this year, and the Red Sox won that series. So we'll see what happens this time around. Want to remind everybody about Saturday, 11-1, Nelson Ace Hardware in Barrie. That's where we are going to be for the Stars and Stripes barbecue party, tasty treats, grill samples. Come hang out Memorial Day weekend, Saturday, May 27th, 11 until 1. Jazz with George Thomas is coming up next. He's on from 7 until 8:38. I'll love to see how he plans the timing on these songs to get them to end right at 8:38. But that's why he's the pro, and that's why I'm on my way out. I'll see you tomorrow. All 90 minutes, everybody will be up again until 7 o'clock. During the Brady Farkas Show, brought to you by Fecto Homes on WDEV, AM, and FM.
Are you looking to get rid of your used mobile home? Here at Fecto Homes, we don't